Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am Midge Noble, your host, and I am very glad that you're here, and I'm glad that I'm here to share this time with you. So today we're going to talk about losses. Now, losses occur all the time. And we, lose hair every morning in the shower. There are all sorts of losses. But the thing that I'm focusing on today, mainly because personally, my beloved and I had a very deep loss today. 10 years ago, my mom-in-law decided that she wanted to adopt a new dog. And we tried all of the local avenues, and she just didn't find the right one that she wanted. But we had gotten connected to Corgi Connection of Kansas, and they are a rescue group that is just an amazing support system for corgis who need to be rehomed or corgis that are coming out of puppy mills. And they had rescued a group of corgis at some point a few months before we were looking, and there was a dog there that they had finally gotten it healthy. It was extremely sick. It was 5 years old, had always been in a crate as a breed bitch, and she was the one. She was the one that my mom-in-law decided that she just absolutely had to have. Now, not only were we connected to this rescue group, we also had made some very dear friends in that area. So we planned a trip to go and spend time with them and then adopt this corgi. We brought her home, and it was as if one of our corgis that had passed before that had embodied this dog, and she just walked in that house, went directly to the closet, never been in this house before, went directly to the closet where the treats were kept, and knew exactly where the water bowl in the kitchen was. It was tucked behind a table somewhere. So it was very interesting that she just kind of made herself at home. She was the sweetest, most therapeutic dog. My mom-in-law would take her to nursing homes, and she was always the perfect little thing. But boy, howdy, this girl had a stubborn streak in her that never wavered. As long as she was doing something that she wanted to do when you were asking her to do it, she was fine to go along. But if she didn't want to do it, it didn't matter how you trained her. It didn't matter whether or not you had trained her. She would not do it. She just wouldn't. So she was a Spitfire, and she got a little bit more Spitfire as she aged. So my mom-in-law had her that whole time until about 2.5 years ago, and she started going into Lewy body dementia, and it got to the point where she could no longer take care of this dog the way she needed to be taken care of, and she was at the place medically and neurologically that she needed to also find special placement to keep her safe. So we got Dakota back, and I can't lie, I hated the way it had to happen, but it was very hard for me to give her up when we brought her all the way back from Kansas, because I fell in love with her when we had her out there for a solid week. And so it was really hard. The great thing was that mom-in-law lived right in our neighborhood. We saw her every Friday evening for supper at her home, and oftentimes we would take her up to the cabin with us and our dogs. She loved being a part of a pack, and she was always trying to get out the door and come with us when we left on Friday evenings, because she really enjoyed having other dogs in the house with her. But she was loved. She was taken care of until she wasn't. So for the last 2.5 years, we've had her back, and she fit right back into our pack. She's been into the cabin multiple times in the last 2.5 years, and she has been loved on by our kids, and she loved them back. So it was really, really a good situation for her. And she was having fun until she wasn't. And then she started to decline. And it's always, always heartbreaking when you have to say goodbye and trying to decide when to say goodbye. So that kind of a loss is really poignant to me today of all days. And I wanted to share a poem, and then we're going to talk more about losses and our relationship with the God of our understanding. This is from the book I've shared before from John O'Donohue, To Bless the Space Between Us, a book of blessings. And this is entitled To Learn from Animal Being. Nearer to the earth's heart, deeper within its silence, animals know this world in a way we never will. We who are ever distanced and distracted by the parade of bright windows thought opens, their seamless presence is not fractured thus. Stranded between time, gone and time emerging, we manage seldom to be where we are, whereas they are always looking out from the here and now. May we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being. Learn to lean low, leave our locked minds, and with freed senses feel the earth breathing with us. May we enter into lightness of spirit and slip frequently into the feel of the wild. Let the clear silence of our animal being cleanse our hearts of corrosive words. May we learn to walk upon the earth with all their confidence and clear-eyed stillness, so that our minds might be baptized in the name of the wind and the light and the rain. That spoke to me so much today as I read through that, because animals are present. They're present in the moment. They, of course, don't do social media. They don't spend all their time complaining about what is happening and what fire has just broke out in the world of politics. They don't care whether or not their special show is on, or if it got preempted because of the news or some other event. They just love being in the moment. They will sit and sniff. Dakota would just sit and turn her face to the wind and just pull her head up and close her eyes and take in all of the scents. And if she was in the house, she would find a bone to, she was old. She was 15. And so she didn't have as many teeth as she used to have, but she still would find a special smelling bone, and she would lick that thing and lick that thing. So she always found something to entertain herself with. But she was just as happy to watch the other dogs engage in play. She really wasn't a player, but she loved to be present. And she would snuggle up next to one. She would go and kiss their nose or nudge them. They would do the same for her. So they were always so present in the moment. I think that's the way Jesus walked the earth. No matter what he was supposed to be doing, we see this time and time in Scripture where Jesus was headed somewhere and they needed to get somewhere, but someone along the way would beg him to help them or be in front of him, and he would notice them. And he always stopped to take that moment, probably much to the chagrin of his disciples that were trying to get him to the places they were supposed to be. But he was present. He always took time to help the people that he needed to help, or to go where he was led by God to go. So there were times that he needed to kind of skirt out or leave the crowds because there was something else he needed to do. And most of the time, he needed to go and spend silence in prayer to, kind of, I always call it get the downloads. He needed the download as to what was the next step. Where were they going? What were they to do? Because he always lived and breathed and moved through what the God of his understanding and what he was part of was doing and directing him to do. So if we took animal wisdom and we kind of combined it with the God of our understanding, being present is so important, because when you're always distracted by something or someone else, we're not being present. And we miss so much of the intimate moments of our lives when we are always hustling and moving from thing to thing, or grabbing for the next shiny object, or doing the next fun thing, instead of always taking a moment to just be present. When they talked in this poem about learning to lean low, leave our locked minds. We are so polarized politically right now that it's like, if you're not this color and you don't believe in all of the things I believe in, I can't even listen to you. My mind is locked and I'm not going to do it. And yet, when we expand and open up our minds to actually listen to what someone's saying, what is the fear behind what they're trying to push through? What are they afraid of? What are we afraid of? And with our locked minds, we can't embrace just the art of being and being human to the person that's across from us. I loved it when Sean talked about, listening for their fear, listening to the commonalities of what we may be talking about in two different ways, but it may be that we're connected in some way that we need to remember. We need to remember that we are all human, and Chris talked about during her episode with us that, being conscious and really connecting and making sure that we lead with compassion in how we listen and how we respond. And I know it's really hard today to look, kind of past our feelings of defensiveness to find that connection, but it is in the connection and in the silence of listening, when we're not trying to come up with the next sling to, give back, to consciously connect to the humanness and listen for what they may be afraid of and why they're digging their heels in their own locked mind. When we are constricted, when we are locked, and we're not allowing the words to flow through us and settle before we come back and engage in a conversation with someone else. It's said to let the clear silence of our animal being cleanse our hearts of corrosive words. There are so many corrosive words that we sling lately, and it's all over the social media. And so I really do encourage all of us to take a break, to turn it off, to do one thing at a time. How many of us watch a television show and we're scrolling through social media because we can't seem to do one thing at a time? I have a nephew that's extremely intelligent. He's probably the smartest one of everybody in our family. And one time, this is like years and years and years ago, he was still in high school, and he was there, and I went down to visit, and he was watching television, scrolling on his phone, and doing something on his computer all at the same time. And he was not missing a beat. I mean, he could. It was amazing that his brain was able to split in that many directions. Mine can, but I never do anything absolutely correctly when I do that. But he could do all of it, and he still can multitask really well as an adult. But we need to remember that being able to be present in the moment and just absorbing ourselves in that moment, to be able to listen to what God wants us to do and how we can put our loving energy out into the world, that takes a little bit of quiet and a whole lot of intention, that we want to hear the voice of the God of our understanding. Whether it's in a nudge, or we see something after that silence that makes us think about where we might need to go and in what direction we need to go into, it takes focus. It takes coming from a place of love and openness. And we are blocking our creative and loving energy by staying stuck in locked minds and corrosive words. We really can learn from the animals as far as embracing each moment, looking for the good in all things, and being grateful for what's right here with us right now. And even though it was devastating to help her cross the Rainbow Bridge, I knew in my heart that we were sending her spirit back to Mom-in-law's spirit, and that they were going to be reunited. I also knew that the most loving thing that we did in this goodbye was being able to get her out of the pain that she was in these last few days. And it's only been, she started taking a turn last week, and this weekend it was quite evident that she had hit her bottom and it was done. She was ready to go. And so being aware of that and watching her through the weekend and doing all of the different things. I mean, we went from walking slowly to then having to carry her more than having her walk, to really paying attention to her and what her body was doing, because it changed dramatically from the last time we were at the cabin until just last week. She was still doing okay, but we were making more modifications for her, and glad to do so. And then by Friday to Sunday, it was evident that her time here on earth needed to end. And so, beloveds, I want you to think about what regret you would have if you continued moving in the way that you are moving right now. You may have no problem with how you're moving. You may be one of the ones that can, really be in the moment. You're turning off social media sometimes. You're taking those breaks. You're going for walks. You're doing the things that we've talked about to keep yourself grounded. And that's great. Teach us how. Do an in-service. We'll sign up. But for those of us who still find ourselves multitasking too much, or not really paying attention to how to just be happy in the moment with what we have, and taking the time to be quiet to recharge our communication with the God of our understanding, let's take that moment. Let's lean in to silence and mindfulness, and then go out and listen to the people around us without trying to figure out how to sling something back. Just listen for what fears they may be having and why they're so polarized. Not to then point it out to them, but to be able to come back to compassion in our own heart, that we've listened, we've heard. We're not going to challenge, but we're going to stay in compassion. That doesn't mean we're not going to march. That doesn't mean that we're not going to ride representatives. That doesn't mean that I'm going to put angry faces and vomit on the, on the social media when I read a post that just absolutely disturbs me. It does mean that I want to hear, and I want to be present, and I want to live the life of a dog that can be so engaging and so loving and so playful, and also know when to be stern. Because, mind you, Dakota let every one of our dogs at some point in her life when she first came that she was the boss of her house and you better follow her rules. And she was very clear about that. So there's a time for sternness and to set boundaries with people. And many of us have said to some of our friends who believe on the other side that we will not talk about politics with you, because we can't come to that place of togetherness sometimes. It's just too polarized. And I will still love you. I just cannot talk politics with you, because it's not a place where we're actually having a conversation and we're coming to some kind of a communal agreement. We can't in some respects. So take care of yourself and set those boundaries, but also remember to listen more than we talk when we're in relationship with someone. Be compassionate and look for the fear that they're having, and end it with compassion, because at the end of the day, we're walking the walk of Jesus, and we want to always leave that loving presence when we leave the room. Thank you, everybody, for listening and subscribing and sharing and always supporting this show. I appreciate you more than you may ever know. Check out our Facebook group, Gay with God, where we do a monthly Zoom group entitled My Faith Journey. That is where you can get support from each other, and we can talk about relevant things that are happening right now in your lives and how we can also make it through as we're trying to walk the walk of Jesus. If you're interested in being a part of that group on Facebook, go to the Gay with God group, answer all the questions so I can invite you inside. And I really mean it. Answer all the questions, and then I'll invite you inside. If you need support to help you through your coming out or your faith journey, go to the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and see how you can connect with me. I do complimentary sessions for people who are considering getting coaching from me. That way we'll get to know each other, and it's completely free to you for that first session, and then we'll talk about what we would like to do from there. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.